how I've evolved this thing so far. So this is really how I would set up this is using waves and an SSL. This is how I would set up a regular vocal chain. If I was just going into a one-off or whatever, set it up this way. We've already talked about how a lot of this stuff works, so now we're getting specific on, let's really dial down like what this means. So first of all, I hit the channel strip, and what's good about the SSL is I can change around what order all the different things on the desk happen in.
Yeah.
So the first thing that's happening is a filter, so low and high pass filter on the microphone. That's great. It feeds right into an EQ, right into the onboard compressor, which the output of that compressor is then feeding my waves chain.
Okay.
All right, so that's pretty standard, for most of this stuff. So this is just where I start with just about anything.
So with your general approach to that compressor, before it goes out to waves, you're treating it kind of like a limiter.
Yeah.
It's a lot of compression.
Yeah, so that's why I'm using the SSL, and I like the sound of the SSL comp.
Yep.
It's nice. It is a little interesting to have one on the desk and another few in waves, but my whole thing was this: if I needed to disengage my outboard stuff, I still wanted my channel to have something there to take care of that vocal, for worst case scenario. So the compressor that's on board, it's compressing. It's in kind of a limiter mode. I'm compressing it 10-to-1, and it's enough threshold where any of the crazy plosives and just hard hits, it will grab as fast as I can get it. So the attack and the release are as fast as they can be set to.
Okay.
And on this console, you can put every compressor in what's called peak mode. So it's like super sensitivity mode. So everything's on fast. So that's what this is doing. So that's the compression. EQ, it's basic console EQ that makes the mic sound, I'm EQing, trying to get the mic sounding natural to me. I'm not necessarily doing all the creative control for that vocalist on the console. I'm kind of thinking about the console. If that vocal mic got handed off to somebody else, regardless of what I've got inserted later, does that microphone sound pretty good in the room? Mm-hmm. So as you can tell, we've talked about this stuff before. I've got a lot of low end rolled off. That's at 164 hertz.
Okay.
There is no low pass filter on it. It's out. And I've just done a little bit of corrective EQ on this microphone, 233 hertz, just kind of a nice little low mid subtraction. In this particular capsule with his voice, with this room, 616 is just kind of something that I never like. There's always usually something between the 4s and 6s that I usually don't like in a vocal. For this one, 616 was the magic number. So that's the real basic console, EQ, filter, compression. That's really what this is doing.
So I'm using the Waves LV1 mixer, so it's all plug-in based, but all of what we're going to talk about is pretty analogous to what you would find on a console channel strip. So the first thing you'll see is the high pass filter, which is at the top of every channel strip. And then for my channel EQ and basic, what you would consider kind of console level compression, I use the SSL channel strip, similar to what you're doing, but that's my EQ and just the first level of compression.
Sure.
And then that goes to F6, and then RVox, which all of us have used and in varying degrees.
Yep.
And then at the end of the chain is the de-esser, the same DPR 402 that you're using.
Now, when we break out and go to waves, this is the strip we've got here. So again, the last thing in the board channel is the compressor. So it's the output of the compressor is feeding this CLA76, which the output of the 76 is feeding the CLA2A. The output of the 2A is feeding an F6, which is then feeding a de-esser last, which is one of the old BSS model compressor. It's really a compressor and a de-esser, but I like the de-esser version. And then I've got, If I need to do Autotune, I've got that inserted so I can literally just kick it in if I need to.
Yeah.
Okay? So blowing these up a little bit, going in black mode for his vocal, just the way it reacts. I like this, and you can watch it if you just watch the thing a little bit. This guy is set where I'm getting a lot of the sound of it from the gain of it.
Yeah.
But I've got it set on almost the fastest attack you can do and a pretty moderate release. So it's going to catch even more of those plosives that still got through the SSL comp.
Yep.
But it's adding a lot of gain into the channel. All right?
Got it.
But it's not doing a ton of gain reduction. In other words,
No.
you're just seeing maybe a dB or two at the
Yeah,
most.
here and there. And if he really gets on it, you'll see it, kind of crank down to like -5 or something. Okay, so the button all is in, which just seems to be the happy place for this unit. Okay, so that's feeding now the CLA. So that guy, you see a lot more stuff happening. So that's pretty normal, -2, -3 gain reduction all the time. And just playing with where the gain is in relation to the gain from the 76 in front of it. So you're just you're stacking these gains. So it's bringing your presence up every time you do that. So now it's starting to sound more like an album vocal, something like that. Okay, so the output of this guy is now feeding an F6. Now this guy's really active. This is where I'm doing the artistic control of this guy's vocal. I mean, this is where I'm trying to find all the little pieces and artifacts and stuff that I want to have a little control of and just see how they react. And I like this update on the F6 where now you can see kind of an RTA version with it.
Yeah.
So you can really dial in this stuff. When we listen to it here in a minute, you'll hear how this comes together. So this guy is then feeding the DPR 402. And honestly, this just makes me feel good because this looks so much like the old school
Looks
units.
familiar.
Yeah. So I don't have it doing any compression. It's only doing de-essing right there with that switch. And it's pretty significant. So between the de-essing it's doing at the end of the chain, I'm already cleaning up some of that high-end issues in the F6.
Yeah.
So right here, but then then it's catching more, and it's in wide mode. This de-esser, you can do just the high frequency stuff, or you can go in wide mode, and it just seems to be a little more friendly where I don't hear it as much.
Is that what I think it is at the end there?
It is. I turned it off just so you wouldn't have a little bit of a stroke before we started, but I do use Vocal Rider as well.
Oh, no.
So
And
Here
look
we
at
go.
that. You even have the range set to where it'll move
It'll go
more
pretty high.
louder than it will quieter.
more louder. Right now it's off, so we'll hear it with and without just to see what it does. But
Okay.
You just leave it off.
you think I should just leave it off?
It scares me.
Well, let's listen to this female vocal, and this is with all the processing in.
Okay.
So you can hear, and you'll also hear reverb and delay and another reverb even.
Hold it.
Whoa,
know.
whoa.
How many then total
have-
in effects?
I have 2 vocal reverbs, a delay that actually feeds a reverb, and ADT, which we all use as a kind of tape delay chorusing kind of
I
thing.
think
So
we just need a moment to ponder how amazing all those words you just said were.
Mark that down.
Yeah.
April 2019.
I'm using quite a few effects. So you're welcome. And
Wow, bro.
Thank you. Yeah,
I kind of want to give you a hug right now, but
Well,
I'm not going to break character.
I
Don't do that.
understand. That would break character
It would
for
break
you.
character.
Well, let's just listen and see what we see from her.
You are worthy. You are worthy of your name. You are worthy.
Kind of like you in multi-rack, when I load my vocal channel, I'm making certain assumptions about what plugins I'll use, but
Right.
I can also make certain assumptions about what I'm going to have to do to those plugins to tame some of what I might be able to anticipate from the singer. So because I know her, I know that, for example, in the F6, we're going to have to deal a lot with this number 4 band, which is that sort of 3K-ish
That
She's
bite.
great. She's got
that
a
bite.
lot
She's
going
got a
on
lot
there.
of it, yeah. And then I don't want to have to do all of that with just the channel EQ. So
Sure.
I'm adding a little bit of top end in the like 12K or so, just on the very sparkly range of her voice. But I'm making a pretty big cut right around 3K.
And you're doing some of that knowing the
her.
compression you're going to put
Yeah.
in, all that stuff. You don't want, right off, you don't want to get it too dark.
Right. But you'll notice too on the compressor side, here on the meter on the right, it's right around 3 dB or so of compression, kind of all the time. 3 to 6 dB of just sort of a leveling
Yep.
at the first stage of compression before it gets out to the F6 for the dynamic EQ and then down into RVox. But RVox, it's doing another sort of 3 or 4 dB or so of compression.
Can we listen to this with all the plugins off and start turning them on one at a time?
Absolutely. So let's
wanna
just kill all
see.
these.
I love the sound of that. It's actually a lot brighter than you've done before.
Yeah.
It's a lot more present.
It's a lot more. Formerly, you were mixing vocals more real thick.
Yeah.
Where they would cut through the mix and they would fill the room up.
Right. So I'm doing a lot of that in other ways in some of the other vocal stuff, but the lead vocal, I've started working to try to get it really, really far out in front where it's just kind of can stay glassy.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does.
And it lets me bring the sound, the presence that you're referring to, it lets me keep that in the band range and in the BGV range and stuff like that. It's been you said at the beginning, this is an evolution.
Yeah.
And it's been cool kind of letting this meander a little bit and see where it's taken me on how it sounds. So let's bring this up with all this stuff off.
My heart is overcome. I see you have lifted my burdens. You surround me with your grace.
Okay, so that's just the console.
Right, and not a lot of compression happening there. So that was just EQ.
That's pretty straight.
Pretty
And
much
that
just
sounds
EQ.
nice.
Sounds
it
great.
sounds good.
What microphone are we listening to?
He's on the SE capsule,
Okay,
which is
the V7.
the V7, which isn't very expensive. It's just a generic capsule that just sounds good. So, okay, so let's turn on this first compressor, okay? So I'll bring it up without it.
Lifted my burdens. You surround me with your grace, full of hope in your presence. Oh. Come on, let's sing together. I can't stop.
So it's another grab, and when I put it in, it changes the texture just a hair.
Yeah.
But we're gonna really hear this one more when I put in the next one that it's feeding. Okay, so let's do that.
I can't stop singing of your love. I can't stop singing of your love. My heart is overcome. I see.
So it's really cool how effective that is with just like 3 dB there, but it's a limiter, right? It's
just cutting it off. So if I want to tame a vocal and really it's like just getting out of control, I'll generally jump to this guy and just put more on it. So, and it still sounds good.
For everything that you've done, I can't stop singing of your love. I can't stop singing of your love.
Like, there's a lot of songs I would leave it set like that and just rock. Like it would.
It's really acting like a leveler and doing a whole lot of smoothing.
It is. This is kind of my favorite piece.
Yeah, me too.
In the vocal chain. So going on here, so let's look at the F6 now. So this is still out. Here's it out.
Can't stop singing of your love. Can't stop
And we'll put it in.
your love. For everything that you've done, I can't stop singing of your love. I can't.
So the crazy thing about that is it looks like it's going crazy.
Right.
You ever notice that on the F6? It's just like, oh, well, that's going to change everything. It's so smooth that all you heard is just the transients now have been affected.
Like anything that could be offensive, or like
just eased it down. But it looks, if you trust your eyes and not your ears, you'd go, oh crap, that thing is going crazy. So now the last thing I put in is that de-esser. So here's without the de-esser.
Every everything that you've done. I
And we'll put it in.
can't stop singing of your love. I can't stop singing of your love. My heart is overcome. I see. You have lifted my burdens.
So
Okay.
here's okay.
So here's what I'm taking away from this. You're doing lots of things, but a little bit of each. Nothing is
bits.
going crazy.
Right.
Okay, so can you turn all of these off and then pop them
Sure.
on one at a time?
Yeah, totally. So you could even hear when we first played the vocal, there was quite a bit of stage volume and stuff from the PA that was getting into her mic. So you're
Yep.
going to hear a lot of that even more. Let me turn the effects off too, so that we can just hear the dry sound of her
Great.
vocal. And here we go.
Heard, no, I had seen the image of the Father.
And then if we bring in the SSL,
You did not speak, you made no sound. You died for your accusers.
so a little bit of sparkle on top.
Yep.
And as your blood fell to the ground,
And that compression ratio is only about 4-to-1 or so. Again, 3 to 6 dB.
and on the day when you arose,
Here's without
the darkness ran for cover.
and back in.
For the King of Kings has claimed his throne.
So it's
So
not
that-
it's not a super drastic amount of EQ.
But it's doing right there. That compressor's doing a lot.
Yeah.
And then F6, if we bring that in, you can see, even in the RTA, you can see the stuff that it's going to want to grab just because those measurements are taken off in that 5,
Yep.
where the 5 and 4 band are. So we'll bring her in and then bring that in.
You're worthy. You're worthy. My author, my maker, my ransom,
Wow.
my savior, my refuge, my hiding place.
That might be a little drastic. I'm not sure.
You're my helper.
But here,
my
you can
healer,
really hear it
my
doing a lot.
blessed Redeemer, my answer, my saving grace.
It's off now.
You're my hope in the shadows, my strength in the battle, my anchor for.
But I think with her vocal character, when she gets that in the battle, that
Yeah.
real growly thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it really helps just kind of not let that get way too out of control.
Because you could spend your entire mix trying to just track her.
Yeah, just chasing that.
So you've got to be a little more generous in some of this stuff.
I think
with that
so.
kind of a vocal.
And the problem with that kind of character, when you get that sort of growly kind of thing, it's such a unique texture in her voice, but that's not something that you can just find that frequency and EQ
Yeah.
it, because it's not really a note. It's
Yeah.
more of a
It's throughout.
it's
Yeah.
just
it's like the timbre of her voice.
of her actual tone, yeah. And then Arvox, of course, this is where a lot of that volume, that makeup gain is going to come from.
Okay.
So let's bring her back up.
You are worthy of your name.
I'll bring it in.
Yes, you are worthy. Ooh, you are worthy of your name.
So, depending on where your singers are in front of your PA or behind your PA, Arvox might be a little much sometimes. You really have to be judicious about how much of that extra gain you're going to add, because each of these stages is a gain stage in some degree.
Right.
You've got output makeup gain, you've got your fader, you've got compressors, you've got all the stuff that's sort of additive.
We've kind of moved away from, I remember 20, 30 years ago when I first started this, you dial in your input gain, get it EQ'd, insert a compressor and go.
Yeah.
We've kind of moved away from that style because now we've got, how many input gains do you have here? There's like almost 4, but not really necessarily input gains, but the gain stage
Yeah.
Right.
that all comprise that whole thing. So as you were adding those in, it was slowly getting softer, softer and softer until you hit this guy.
Yeah.
And so this is really your makeup gain to the whole chain, right?
But you could hear how once that came back in, it added a ton of top end.
And the presence came up too.
The presence came back.
Yeah. The way I would check that is sometimes in a mix, I might reach over, or maybe in a rehearsal, maybe in a sound check, I might just reach over and go, I wonder what it sounds like if I just pop that out. And you're like, yeah, I like it better with it in. But it's not like, oh, who turned off the lights?
Right.
I want it to be subtle. I want the stuff to be nuanced. I want the vocal to sound good off the console.
Yeah.
And then I start using this stuff to be artistic.
I think for a lot of us, when people hear about the fact that we use a lot of compressors, you've got essentially 5 different compressors
Right.
in your chain. People think, how could you use that much compression?
Right.
It's not that much gain reduction.
Right.
It's just each one has its own little color.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, because really you're just kind of smoothing
Right.
the tonality.
Right.
And you're using it as a way to, they are different they're affecting gain in a different way, and you
Right.
are getting some output gain from each one, but the way it all comes together, there's a roundness to it and a
Right.
smoothness that you can't always get from just one console compressor.
That's great. And I think something to remember in that, with that line of thinking, is I may start here, but depending on the vocalist, you may automatically go, man, 2 of these I don't need, because they might be a novice or maybe lesser experience, or they may not have great mic technique. That much stuff all of a sudden just hurts you more than benefits you.
So from a workflow technique, you have this saved as your general chain.
Right.
So if you have a new singer who comes in, you can just load this rack.
Yep.
And all these things are in. You may put them in one at a time or not use all of
Correct.
them. But you've got it saved as its own preset that you say, this is my kind of starting point for a vocal.
That's right.
Use or not use, but it's there. The tools are there if you want to use them.
That's right. The Autotune is out right now, but it is active. I mean, it's ready to go. So you click it in, and it's just seamless if you want to use it. And the thing with Autotune, I think we've talked about this. I'm sure it's been talked about before by other people. There's a love-hate with Autotune. So everybody thinks you put a really bad vocalist on Autotune, it's going to make everything great.
No.
It usually makes it worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
I use Autotune when you have a really great vocalist.
Yeah.
And you just want to make it even greater.
Yeah.
It's really helpful. But for me, if I build it into the chain, it's ready to go.
I love to hear myself talk.
Sometimes it's actually interesting. But you know what? We talk to a lot of other interesting people too.
We have a podcast. Go search for it, the MXU podcast.